You can begin, Rob.
Oh, no introductions. All right. Well, so thank you everybody for joining today. I'm Rob Koplowitz, and I'm a Vice President and Principal Analyst with Forrester Research. And I cover areas of process automation, area that we call digital process automation. And I'm here with Tim from Newgen. Tim, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Certainly. Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Kreiner, and I'm the VP of Strategic Sales with Newgen. And I'll give a little bit more background here in just a little bit. Thank you very much, Rob.
Great. Thanks, Tim. And thanks again, everybody, for joining. We're going to spend about 20 minutes or so, and I'm going to walk you through what we're seeing in the world of process automation right now. And it's actually a very interesting time, probably more interesting than I've seen since maybe the early days of BPM. I've never seen quite so much shift. And we really have spent a lot of time gathering up some data and doing a lot of interviews in this topic to get a sense of what's going on here and why this is so impactful. And when I'm done, I'm going to pass over to Tim, and Tim's going to talk a little bit around some deeper case studies that actually reinforce the data and the trends that Forrester is seeing in the market. So you have a chat window up, folks. So if you have questions, please put them into the chat window. We will likely address most of them towards the end, but we also will peek at it maybe in real time and take a look and see if we want to address something in real time as we go through the materials here. So first off, the title that we're looking at here, I think is really the piece that is really so dramatically different from what we've seen in process over the course of the last 2 years. Digital process automation is the fuel for digital transformation. So we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about digital transformation. I know that is a somewhat nebulous term. People use it in different ways, but I think when you look at the data, you'll get a sense of how people are thinking about digital transformation. And I think the other thing that becomes increasingly clear as we look at this data and then we look at the trends over the course of the last 4 or 5 years is that most of these digital transformation projects are really struggling. And where they're struggling is around the role of process. So I want to just pop over and take a look at this quote. So I really like this quote as a setup in terms of what I think is really going on here. This is from 2015, but I keep using it, and they keep coming out with great new research on this topic. By the way, Harvard Business School is also coming out with great research on the topic of digital transformation, but I love this quote from MIT Sloan Management Review, and it's from a document called Strategy, Not Technology Drives Digital Transformation. And if you look at the highlighted portion here, the power of digital transformation strategy lies in its scope and objectives. Less digitally mature organizations tend to focus on individual technologies and have strategies that are decidedly operational in focus. Digital strategies in the most mature organizations are developed with an eye on transforming the business. So as we look through the data today, we're going to think a little bit about why digital transformation projects have struggled in the past. And what we are really coming up with is there has been a focus on front-end technology. There's been a focus on a great web experience. There's been a focus on mobile applications. Increasingly now we're thinking, well, no, the answer has to be, voice or chat. If I don't have an Alexa skill, I'm not digitally transformed. But all of that doesn't really matter if you're not operationally set up to handle end-to-end automation. So what's changing? So first off, if we look at the data, are the clients that we're talking to and the other survey respondents getting this? And I'm going to apologize that this is not as beautiful as most slides that we put up from Forrester because it hasn't been through our graphics treatment. The reason it hasn't been through our graphics treatment is it's really hot off the presses. We just pulled this survey in, and the data on it was just so compelling that I felt the need to share it. So the question we asked is about, I think there were nearly 400 respondents, 375 respondents, so really a really good statistical turnout. It's sort of the first piece that tells you something's going on here is that that's a lot of respondents for a survey of this type for us. People are very excited about this topic. And one of the questions we asked was, please describe the role of process improvement in your organization. Look at the top answer, 65%. It's a critical part of our business strategy. It directly supports initiatives like digital transformation and customer experience. Now look at the second bar. It plays an important tactical role, reducing costs, cycle times, error rates, etc. Tim will get up, and Tim's been in the BPM business for a very, very long time. I know many of you on the call have been as well. That second bar, that's what used to drive BPM, right? We're taking out costs, we're driving efficiencies, we're lowering error rates, and that's how we're measuring success of these initiatives. Twice as many are now saying this is part of a broader strategic initiative. Very rarely did you see a BPM project at the center of, I'm reinventing my business. But now you're seeing these projects come right at the center of reinventing our business. And the way they're measuring it and the primary focus is changing as well. So this is a trend document and a piece of trend data. So the way we literally ask this question is, what were your goals 2 years ago? What are your goals now? And what are your goals 2 years from now? Look at cost reduction, which was, the classic piece of information that we tracked for success on traditional BPM. 2 years ago, it was the top thing that drove process improvement. Now it's down around 12%. It drops a little bit 2 years from now if we project out. Look at the green line. Accelerate digital business transformation. 2 years ago, 14%. Now, it's almost a third of organizations are focusing on that. 2 years out, half. I want to actually make just one comment about this data in particular. We did this survey 2 years ago, and the answers were the same. So what does that mean? It means the goals have remained the same, but despite the fact that 2 years have passed, no progress has been made. So we know this is important, but what we're also discovering is it's really hard. And by the way, it's not a technology problem. We also asked about the methodologies that people were using. How are you actually defining the processes you're automating? And we looked at a lot of different methodologies, and it was an apples and oranges comparison. We looked at, are you using waterfall, or are you using agile? Are you using BPMN as your mapping tool? Are you using Lean Six Sigma? And the thing that really jumped out at us was this piece of information: customer journey mapping. Are you using changing or expanding the use of customer journey mapping as part of your process methodologies? 57% are increasing, and 27% are increasing significantly. This is a huge difference. So what's happening in the world of customer journey mapping, and why this is so important to process professionals, is they don't control this process. They do not control the end-to-end process. When you begin going in and looking at customer journey mapping, it crosses organizational boundaries, it crosses legacy systems, and these are a couple of the areas where we see digital transformation failing. But I would argue vehemently that your customers do not care about your organizational boundaries. They do not care about your legacy systems. All they know is there's something going on, and I have no idea what's happening right now. The process has stopped. I'm not getting updates. You're passing spreadsheets. I don't care. Your competitor is doing it faster in an automated way and giving me end-to-end visibility. So this is a really big challenge. This is a really big challenge for organizations to overcome. And it is at the heart of digital transformation. The second piece that's changing is that there's a huge focus on design thinking. We sort of think about traditional BPM. We rolled it out to a fairly limited number of people. They tended to be task workers. If you didn't use it, well, guess what? We fired you. Now, all of a sudden, we're rolling out process applications to many, many more people in the organization, and the design better be good. If all my employees are going to touch it, then it better be a world-class user experience. And increasingly, these things are rolling out to end users. So if your customers are going to touch it, it better be great, because if it's not great, they're going to vote with their feet and leave. It's got to support all the formats that you need, all the channels that you need, and you have to be out on that cutting edge to understand what is the next design principle that's going to be become critical. Again, the numbers like customer journey mapping, just, mind-boggling, 56% increasing and 26% significantly increasing the use of design thinking in their process applications. So something is changing here, but what's happening on the back end? We've been living with this arbitrary separation between the back end and the front end. I'll build a great mobile application, I'll be digitally transformed. Well, will you really? Because if we look at what's really going on in the back end of the organization and how processes are being run, look at the middle line and the gray, green, and yellow lines in terms of what people are doing around electronic manual routing of documents. 50%, many organizations still have 50% still have many of their processes running through these types of processes. 18%, most of my processes, and 4% all my processes. The same thing happening with paper-based routing, which we thought we were beating out of the organizations, but we really aren't. So I need end-to-end automation, but most of my stuff is still spreadsheets getting emailed around running macros. Well, that is completely invisible to the end user. It's completely invisible to the customer journey map. So where are we shifting? How are we building things differently? We focused on, is low code one of the things you're looking at as a differentiator? And look at the change in numbers from 2016 to 2017. In 2016, 57% of organizations didn't use low code. That number dropped to 34%. And then as you can see, the yellow and the gray and the green across the top, 24% planning to use, 31% already using it, and 12% expanding usage. Why are we focusing so much on low code and thinking about low code? We think low code is one of the ways that you go after those manual processes. So I mentioned we're not using the term BPM at Forrester anymore. We're using the term digital process automation. And the three characteristics of digital process automation that are just fundamentally different from BPM are, it's fast. I don't spend 6 months speccing an application, figuring out the process, building it, and then turning it over and having something that's fairly rigid. I'm building things very quickly. Sometimes they're situational, sometimes they may be departmental, and they certainly are going to change a lot every day. Number two, I mentioned the role of design thinking. It's got to be delightful to users. It's going to be used by many, many more people than these have used in the past. And so it has to be a world-class user experience. And it's got to be innovative. You're now talking about pushing these applications all the way out to the customer. Well, guess what? Your customer expectations are moving at the speed of the consumer market. I need to understand what's happening in the best consumer application, and I better be close to that in terms of my experience. So the world now kind of shifts into two types of processes, and these two types of processes come together to drive digital transformation. At Forrester, we use the terms deep and wide. So a deep process would be the traditional processes in our organization, complex customer onboarding, claims management. These things are still around, and they still require a great deal of diligence. They're structured and they're methodical. There's not a lot of them. They tend to be very mission critical to my business. The way the team comes together to build them tends to be the IT organization, the center of excellence, the business. They come together, they work together for a very long time. IT owns the diligence. IT says, don't worry, we're going to handle compliance, we're going to handle security, we're going to handle privacy, we're going to handle all of the issues around reliability and governance, and the focus is on cost reduction and compliance. But the new class of applications that's emerging are these wide applications. And you build them quickly, and you build a lot of them, and it tends to be the business leading it almost always, and in some instances, maybe the business building and provisioning the application on their own. IT is in the guardrail business, which is probably harder than ensuring your own diligence. I'm going to make sure that I provide you with certifications, with training, with access mechanisms, all the way down the line that makes sure that when you deploy that application, it will be run hygienically within my organization. And since you're doing it a lot, I have to do it in a very different way. And again, the focus being on customer outcomes. The problem is the way we've always done deep is not going to get us to wide. The bridge does not get all the way there. So what is the problem with the way we've traditionally looked at BPM applications and honestly, most of the mission critical applications within our organization? If we think of three classes of applications, we've got our highly controlled IT applications. The old world of BPM lived in this world. We've got consistent BT applications, business technology applications, applications specifically designed to win, serve, and retain customers. This is where we focused our digital transformation efforts. There's more of them than there are the highly controlled applications. And then there's the business-driven applications. Those are the manual applications, the back office things that we thought didn't matter. They're not customer-facing, but they are customer-supporting as we look at them in context of a customer journey map. They touch the customer experience. We don't have the capacity to do all of these the old way that we used to build applications. We don't have the business knowledge. By the time we start to build these applications, the way that we interface between the business and IT is wrong. We spend a lot of time speccing it. We throw something back over the wall. It's wrong. We have to do things very differently. And at the very base level, if I just look at the numbers from the US as a proxy for this, US Bureau of Labor Statistics does a very nice job of gathering up information around different job types. We're 500,000 developers short in the US alone, building things the old-fashioned way. So clearly there has to be a different way to reach this long tail of applications that become so important. So that gap that we saw before, we see low code, it's repeatable, and the approach holds promise to fill that gap. It's not the only technology that's going to fill that gap. It's one of the technologies that's going to fill that gap. But this is really where we see that uptake of low code to go after that massive number of applications that if we strategically align towards digital transformation, holy moly, that's a daunting task to begin to address all of those. But you have to think about it in terms of really how your organization runs. So you're looking at low code applications, great, there's a lot of them out there, but they still have to integrate with your systems of record. This is a non-trivial task. You still have to have those processes that cross those legacy systems, and we all know integration is a bear, and there are vendors that have invested very heavily in making it a lot easier. They've got to handle complex changing processes. Process is hard, and everybody's using the P word. Every vendor that has a simple event-driven triggered workflow system is calling it process, and they're not all process. We have to have an actual appreciation for the complexity of a process-driven application. We still need to ensure governance and compliance. Security and privacy are not going away. We're getting back to those conversations around guardrails. And we think that you really have to do this consistently, that you have to consistently approach it with skills and investments that say, if in fact I'm going to let the departments, the organizations move faster, I have to do it in an architectural approach that says what they build in this part of the organization has to be able to be integrated into an extended long-term process that looks like a customer journey map. Think about what we've done over the course of the last few years in an effort to move quickly. Let the departments and the organizations serve themselves. They can go faster. What you end up with, if you don't approach this strategically, is a whole bunch of little islands of technology that are not capable of being connected to one another. That's no different than passing around Excel spreadsheets. You still cannot get to an end-to-end process. And the list goes on. One quick comment about what we're seeing in terms of the future. I did do some deep research around AI and AI in the role of supporting process initiatives. And we saw three patterns, and I think we'll just go through them quickly here. So the first one is AI is developing new interfaces. AI systems have traditionally been a little bit difficult to interface with. I talked about delighting users. One of the ways you delight users is you figure out how to touch them in the most effective way. And the most effective way might be through a chat pane. It might be through a text application. It might be through speaking off your request to something like an Alexa device or a Google Home device or through your phone. This gives us two opportunities. One, it gives us new access points that allow people to do things in places that they couldn't do them before. but it also allows users that are more comfortable speaking through natural language to interface with the system than actually going through a complicated interface. So it brings in new users and new interaction models. The second one is cognitive experience. And so our cognitive expertise, we're finding increasingly that companies, vendors are looking at, things like fraud detection, things like content analytics to identify and classify data, external sources of expertise. These things being able to be called from the outside and brought into the application in real time through either external AI services or services that are external to the application itself. And then lastly, process is difficult. So process automation and orchestration and optimization is a big focus. Are your processes running well? We've traditionally looked at analytics to assess that. And now increasingly we're looking at AI and machine-driven technologies that actually can not only tell us your processes aren't efficient, but we actually can do root cause analysis and tell you how to make them better. So these three patterns we're going to track very closely over the course of the next few years. We think some of them will be real disruptors. So just a few things to think about before I pass it back. So low code and its role in digital transformation. Really talked about building things fast, those wide applications. Recognize that the people that know your business best are your business people. They know what's going on. And as you move forward, you're probably going to have to release that iron grip on development and begin to embrace that business as development partners. And that's a hard one. But while you're doing this, make development, the process, predictable and repeatable. Don't let the Wild West, don't have 1,000 flowers bloom and let everybody do whatever they want. You have to do this in a consistent way. And then probably the subject of a lot of research going forward is, what is the support organization that will be very different from the organization that's tuned to actually handle a few high volume mission critical applications? Suddenly you're in the change management business. Your Six Sigmas have to think about the role of product very differently because it's much less contained than it used to be. And you need a seat at the table around the digital transformation efforts. So with that, what I want to do is I want to pass it back over to Tim, and Tim has some great examples to light up organizations that are actually pursuing these strategies.
Hi, this is Tim, and I should be sharing my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
We saw it for a moment, but it's gone now.
Okay, is it on?
Back again.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. Rob, thank you for the introduction. Very interesting presentation. It's really difficult to keep up with that, with all the different points that you had in there. Over the last couple of months, I've been studying this subject matter. Over the last 2 decades, I've actually been working in this. So, as I mentioned earlier, I'm with Newgen, and I've been in this industry since the early days of workflow and BPM. And Rob gave us a very interesting perspective from his position as an analyst who's worked with all of the vendors and many, many different customers. I'm going to come to pretty much the same conclusions, but from a slightly different perspective. My perspective is that I've been working with customers for over 20 years that have been using BPM to help change our organizations along the lines of streamlining and improving those business processes. And what I'm seeing right now is something that's very, very different and exactly in line with what Rob had mentioned. And we'll look at that. Rob showed a slide in his presentation, and he showed a couple of things I thought were very relevant. And one of those was the slide that showed that customer experience and digital transformation is changing. These are now the hottest priorities in the industry, and I couldn't agree anymore. Over the last couple of years, I've had an opportunity to travel all across America and Latin America, and I've dealt with executives from all over, multiple different kinds of organizations that are in various stages of their digital transformation. And many of these organizations have created roles for innovation that are supposed to assist in digital transformation. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the years to come. I'm seeing it in every large organization I deal with. Just very briefly, a little bit about Newgen. For those of you that may or may not be very familiar with who we are, we've been in business for about 25 years. We operate on 5 continents. We've got an extremely large portfolio of successful applications. We typically focus on very complex applications that require digital process automation, as well as managing all of the unstructured information that users need to fulfill their business. We create near out-of-the-box solutions to solve these complex business issues. And we have absolutely extensive experience, and we draw on that to create these out-of-the-box solutions that are based on best practices. If you look at the screen here, you can see deep and wide. These are the 2 concepts that Rob was talking about. And Rob mentioned some of their characteristics, namely that deep tends to be a fewer number of very complex processes that are led by IT with an iron grip. Wide tends to be much more rapid deployments, spanning many different departments and functions with little or no code being developed. That's how they can get out there so quickly. And IT plays a significant but different role in both of these 2 approaches, as we're going to see. Over the next few slides, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about I'm going to give my vision on what deep and wide is and means. I want to talk about some of the considerations. And as I do this, I want you to consider your organization and look at it, as well as understand that these are broad-based general requirements for deep or wide implementations. And then I'm going to explore 2 different organizations who very successfully implemented a deep implementation and a very wide, broad implementation. We'll look at some of the benefits that they've gotten. Then I'm going to discuss some of the major challenges that you're going to face, that they faced. And then we're going to talk about how to help you go deep and wide, and then what Newgen might be able to do to help assist you. Now, having said that, one of the very first things to notice is that digital transformation is a journey. It's not a destination. You don't just get there all at once. Many organizations are on a continuum from either just beginning to look at digital transformation all the way through the Ubers and the Amazons that everyone likes to talk about. In fact, I wanted to talk about both Uber and Amazon, but after thinking about it, realized that for every one of these organizations, there could be 25,000 other organizations that are in an earlier stage of their journey. So instead, I want to focus on some of the considerations and challenges that most of you in this audience will be facing as you look at your journey. So the concept of deep aligns more closely with what the traditional BPM projects of the past were. The traditional project was very large, it was complex, it required large teams of people, and it took anywhere from 9 to 24 months to implement. I've seen them maybe 12 months on some of those, but I've also seen some that have gone to 50 and 60 months. And the concept of wide is a little bit different. It's driven because some of the newer technologies, particularly mobile and cloud, these have enabled low-code BPM, which allows organizations to implement these projects on a broader basis all throughout the organizations much faster than the traditional heavy code bases. For a variety of reasons, an organization may be more inclined toward a deep approach, and another organization may be inclined toward a wide approach. There are a lot of reasons why this might occur, but some of those may be the cultural role that IT plays in the organization. And over the course of the next couple of slides, I'd like to highlight some of the considerations for both deep and wide. And as I do it, I'd like for you to consider your own organizations and assess which style is better for you. And after discussing these, we're going to look at 2 cases of Fortune 500 companies whose names you probably know. I'm not going to mention their names, and we'll compare and we'll contrast their experiences. So the first consideration is that your organization may have many processes that are manual. In some cases, some of these processes can be even paper-driven, and those affect the speed with which you can run your business. You'd be surprised to see how many Fortune 1000 companies still use spreadsheets to keep track of critical business matters. I can give examples, but I don't want to embarrass anyone, don't want to get in trouble with anyone either. But in the deep approach, you would have a fewer number of critical processes. You're not going to try to automate everything. You're going to look only at those key processes, and you're going to focus on those. And they generally tend to be very highly complex. And the complexity of those oftentimes requires that you have either internal or external experts. It's not at all uncommon to see large organizations, some of the larger consulting firms, spending years in organizations mapping every single process all the way down to sub-processes in the organization. Costly exercise, but it's one way of transforming your overall organization. The organizations that generally do this tend to be a lot larger, and they're more established. Because they're larger and they're more established, they may have multiple systems in place already. Smaller organizations are not immune to this either. Complexity can occur in every single organization. More often than we find that the larger organizations may have systems that evolved over many years, and therefore they may be in a better position to go ahead and to look at this type of approach. In contrast, the wide approach is a little bit different. The wide approach generally focuses on multiple quick projects. And by quick projects, I'm talking about a project that might be up and running in 8 to 16 weeks. Okay. The business users define their requirements, and they may work with IT and their suppliers to independently come up with developed solutions with little or no code at all. Rob mentioned something that oftentimes business users may be enabled to create their own applications. This is a new trend, something that before we never would have looked at. But business is driving more and more of these requirements, and they're involved in the actual implementation. We're finding that these organizations tend to be very adverse to long development cycles. They are in a hurry, they're agile, they're quick. They can't afford to wait around for long development times. And one of the other factors that we're seeing in here, particularly when you have multiple people in an organization developing applications, is governance becomes an issue. And if the organization is an older organization, and like one of the ones that we're going to be talking about here, they have many systems in many different countries, different users all over, creating their own little silos of information and silos of processes. And there's no standardization. So this is very often a driving factor. So let's look at a case. This is an actual case study from a large organization that's deep. This is a large multinational organization that has acquired multiple other companies. And over the past 6 years or so, they've been looking at operational efficiency. They've been looking at methods and means, and they've brought in consultants to help them figure out how they can be much more efficient. The tools and the products that they prepare are products that end users, end customers have to have. But they want to have a much more intimate relationship, and they want their customers to have multiple different products from the same exact company. So customer intimacy is one of their driving goals. Since they have many different products, many different product lines, many different suppliers, they've set up a shared service organization, and their goal is to try to increase product development, try to increase the customer service. They want to get much closer to their customers, but they want to do so in such a way that they can beat their competition. And this is not a casual goal. This is a goal where they have explicitly stated they want to come out and they want to improve all of their internal systems from a business perspective to help drive that business. But they have many, many different systems in-house today. And what they're looking at is using Newgen's IBPS software as an intermediate layer where they can have all users interacting with one common user interface, irrespective of the back-end systems. So that way, over time, as they get rid of back-end systems or they change those back-end systems, the end users are still operating with the user interfaces that were developed for them. Their goal is to bring products to the market much quicker. And so the three most important criteria for them are operational efficiency, visibility, and agility. This seems pretty standard. This is what most organizations want to have. And if we look at some of the key benefits that they have received already and that they're planning on receiving, under efficiency, they've really changed their cycle time. Their process execution time has been greatly reduced. And by doing that, they've increased their overall user productivity, affecting bottom line cash flow. Those are great goals. By using real-time dashboards and reporting, they're able to get instant reporting on where every process in the organization is. If they can see and identify issues before they occur, they're in a better position to see and avoid those problems and avoid compliance issues. They can take decisions faster because many of the decisions and the business rules have been put in place to help them drive the business. And if they can do all of that, they end up having a much higher level of customer satisfaction, both with their internal and external customers. And as they affect their external customers and the people that actually buy their products and make those available to their consumers, it ends up in more sales, thus increasing the cash flow and the profitability of the organization. In a competitive industry, agility and the ability to adapt very quickly is critical. And this is one of their goals, and this is something that they're able to achieve. They're able to react far quicker to any kind of internal or external market changes. And by being able to adapt very quicker, there is a tendency that the first person in a market to adapt to a change is the first person to win in that particular market. So these are just some of the benefits that they've received. And this is a very interesting case. This organization has about 14 major areas of processes with multiple smaller projects under each one of those. But these are heavy-duty, long-term, transformative projects that are going to take multiple years to implement. And let me contrast that with an organization that is that's using a wide implementation approach. This is a global organization that operates in over 100 countries. They operate all over the world, different languages. They have established systems in every geography. They do not have a shared service organization, so standardization was a real issue for them. They've got about 20 to 25 major platforms throughout the organization. Those platforms don't always necessarily talk to each other. And if they don't always talk to each other and people always can't see what's going on, then there's a general governance issue. And management wanted to get around the governance of all of their business processes and all of their content, all of their repositories, all of their applications, because these applications were expanding all throughout the organization. They formed project teams, and those project teams have both business and IT people. And they're not looking for long-term projects. They're looking for projects that will be in existence for the long term, but they're looking for rapid development projects, consolidating information into central repositories, making consistent processes throughout the organization. They're establishing a center of excellence, and it's a true enterprise candidate with both wide and deep requirements all across the organization. They started off with 3 projects at the very beginning, and over the course of the first 6 months, they've identified 30 new projects. At the pain areas that they had, the fact that they didn't have standard processes throughout the organization, that individual countries and geographies were driven more by what the users in that country needed rather than a standard approach, was a real problem. The problem that they had many different systems in place was another issue. Data validation and everyone doing things in exactly the same consistent manner was an issue, as was visibility into the overall processes. While implementing this particular approach, they've been able to centralize all of their processes on one global platform that's distributed throughout the world over Amazon. There's one single user interface that may connect multiple back-end systems, and as they achieve their goal and objective of reducing the total number of systems that they have, we're going to see that the users will continue to operate through this single interface, but the back-end systems may be changing, helping to achieve one of their high goals for the organization. Validations are now done automatically through the rules engine in our IBPS engine. It uses color coding to handle all kinds of exceptions and invalid data to make it more visible. Real-time dashboards help also in doing that, and they help the senior management see exactly what the throughput is for the organization. As we look forward, some of the major challenges that you're going to face, I've identified about 5 major challenges, and I think Rob would comment also that one of those is that organizations that have disparate technologies, different platforms and different systems in-house, very frequently have a challenge in getting those systems to talk to each other. Getting your legacy applications to share data with other applications is a major issue and challenge needs to be addressed. The organizational culture. I'm sorry?
You said Rob would agree. Rob would indeed agree. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. We see this everywhere. I've got organizations right now that have 3 major platforms. They can't get them to talk back and forth, so people work in their silos and then shoot email back and forth. Not particularly good. The second thing has to do with the culture of an organization and the ability of the people to take the change and the project leadership. And if you don't have leadership that's absolutely committed to transforming the organization, it's not going to happen. There's got to be a proper mix of business and IT. Years ago, IT pretty much drove all decisions. We're seeing, as Rob indicated, a major shift here. Business is now driving more of the business, but more importantly, strategy, as Rob mentioned at the very beginning, the strategy is linking both business and IT in a very curious way, and we have to have technology that enables people to do that. Some of the newer technologies like mobile applications, tablets, smartphones, or cloud are drastically changing what's capable today. The type of applications that we have today in commercial operations are things that we never would have thought possible just a few short years ago. Now, these last 2 bullets are really important. One challenge is going to be the proper selection of your initial projects. There is a tendency to go off and to try to do everything all at once. It's not a very smart strategy. I highly suggest that you select 3 or 4 very high value projects. And those projects could be projects that are strategic or visible. And we're going to use those projects to help educate your team and the company. We're going to make sure that you can work with the technology. And we are going to make sure that we can actually deliver profitable solutions for the organization. And the last one here is that first project has to be critical. No matter what else, you have got to deliver a success in your first projects, or the second, third, and fourth are going to be much more difficult. So how do we help organizations go wide? And this is both Forrester and Newgen together. Rob mentioned that you need to identify at least one or multiple business stakeholders and IT stakeholders who really understand the challenges that the organization faces. Not only understanding the process, you need to understand the perceptions of those processes, because you can talk to 3 different people in an organization and get 3 complete different perceptions of what the process and the challenges are. This is where we can come in and we can help you get a better understanding of what those are. And one of the things that frequently is done is we hold workshops, and you can workshop potential solutions. And after you workshop it, you see how the technology can be used, then you can build a plan, both for initial projects and for the longer term. You need to identify and prioritize the required benefits. You have to have this done before you get started. If you don't have this done before you get started, you're on a journey without a map, and you have no way of measuring your progress. You need a clear and honest assessment of your technology landscape and your organizational landscape and the type of people that you're going to have working with this technology. You must check and see if your systems can talk to each other, and if they can't, you need to have an assessment as to why not. And can you install an intermediate layer, like a BPM layer, that will talk to each of the individual systems and deliver information to your end users? Critical. You need to identify quick wins and a long-term expansion. And then you have to be agile. Things are going to change no matter what you do on day 1. By 6 months, by 3 months, you're going to have users that want to do things very differently. And change management, something else that Rob mentioned a while ago. You have to be agile and you have to be prepared. The new technologies are going to allow you to do many new things, but it's also going to be very quick. And you have to control the pace of adoption. There's a tendency to want to do everything all at once. I'm just speeding up a little bit through these last couple of slides right here. But Newgen has been in the business, as I mentioned, for about 25 years. And we have a very comprehensive BPM suite, or a digital automation suite, that allows you to model business processes, to capture data through dynamic forms, very comprehensive business rules, master data management, real-time reporting, and business activity monitoring, and then connectivity to hundreds of other systems. All of these are built in the framework of our BPM engine, which works on top of a very comprehensive content management engine, electronic content management. And we create near out-of-the-box configurations, routines, and applications that run on top of this platform, to where all we have to do is we have to change the parameters, maybe change and map databases and fields, and we can have systems up, whether it be a deep or a wide implementation. We can do it very quickly through doing this by making all the connectivity. So what can Newgen do to help you? Give us a call. Feel free to give us a call for a no commitment discussion. We'll be more than happy to discuss what your projects are. We're more than happy to discuss and brainstorm with you what might be able to be done. We've got deep experience with both large organizations and small organizations. We've got organizations with up to 25,000 users online, and we have small organizations with just a handful of customers. Our internal group has an awful lot of experience. We have very low turnover on the professional services side, and this experience that they've gained in other projects is available to you. It's available in the form of business analysts and solutions architects. We'll offer a free workshop, and we'll help you discover what your needs and requirements are. We'll sit down and let you see if this technology can interface with yours. We'll let you get a feeling for what it would look like in your organization. We'll even help you select your initial projects and develop a roadmap of all the projects to begin your digital transformation journey. So it doesn't matter if you're at the very front end of your journey, if you're well into your journey, wherever you are, we'd be more than happy to come in and see how we can help you use some of this technology here and some of the combined learning between Forrester and us to make your journey a success. And with that, my contact information is on the screen, and I'd be delighted to hear from any one of you. You can feel free to shoot me either a text message at the mobile number below or an email here. And if you'd like additional information, please don't hesitate to call. This is all that I have. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Back to Rob and my team. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Tim. We do have a couple of questions, so I'm going to begin with the first one. Question 1 for today is, what processes should be automated first? Should they be the customer-facing processes or internal back office processes? This question is for Rob.
Well, I think what you have to do, it's really interesting. So Tim, as you were speaking and you talked about all of those different touch points where systems don't talk to each other, the thing that occurred to me is we have these customer journey mapping professionals at Forrester, and they put together these broad maps and they use Post-it notes, right? It's very, very manual because it's very interactive. It's very work group style, a way of approaching it. And I asked, well, what are all the pink Post-it notes? What's the significance of the pink Post-it notes? And the significance of the pink Post-it notes is those are manual processes, or those are processes where the systems don't talk to each other. So as you were talking through that and assessing all of these touch points, it occurred to me that this is the big problem. Now, if I talk to our customer experience professionals at Forrester, what they will tell us is that only 30% of the time is IT involved in this customer journey mapping. And so, the pink Post-it notes are basically, and then a miracle happens. So I think as you look at this, you don't want to necessarily differentiate between front and back office processes in terms of establishing what's best for a customer outcome. You have to think about it holistically. So if you start with a customer journey map, you should be able to identify those instances where the customer is most likely to be leaving, most likely to create churn, most likely to walk away from the transaction, most likely to indicate dissatisfaction, most likely to point to something as a reason for low net promoter score. That could be front office. That could be, your fundamental experience of working with the application is just terrible. And that's what we have focused on. But it might also be that back office. So I don't think it's easy to say it's a front office or back office problem. It is a, what does the customer journey outcome need to do, and how are we measuring it, and what's really getting in the way of it? What I would say is that we haven't looked at the back office, and that way more often than any of us expected, it is a process that sits in the middle that is causing a manual wait state in a customer experience. Tim, anything to add? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And, highlighting those touch points, highlighting where systems don't talk is really important. You really need to look at a case-by-case basis. For one organization, it could be that your biggest challenges and the biggest improvements that you can get are automating the back end, requires looking and analysis. Or it could be that it could be out at the front end. So it's going to vary on a case-by-case basis, and we'd really need a few more details to see how best we could help you, I think.
But I would say that one thing that I would leave, this group and the people that are going to tend to dial into this webinar with is IT needs to be at the table, right? 30% of the explodes from dozens to, 4 or 5x that number.
And there's a cautionary note on that. I think you got to be very careful, because when Sally's building her application and I want to come in, there's a certain level of learning that you have to have, a certain level of knowledge that you need to have. And organizations would be remiss to let everyone just develop everything, and they're not going to do that.
No,
there needs to be
that IT governance guardrail position, which is a new thing for them to be in. And it gets back to that concept of the center of excellence that actually says, we see an end-to-end solution. Sally doesn't necessarily know. She knows how to automate her portion of it. She doesn't necessarily know what the end-to-end goal is. And so, I think we've seen this sort of like a little bit of backlash against the process professionals. The Six Sigmas make things difficult. And I don't think that's appropriate, right? I think we have to think that these will become, and they ever have been before.
And is there a long-term future, Rob, for the Six Sigma professionals that are out there?
Yeah, I absolutely is. I think where we finally end up on this process is when we look at what the digital process automation center of excellence is, or the digital transformation, or whatever it ends up being called, that these out of their control. But I think they become absolutely critical to avoid sort of the old Lotus Notes access chaos, everybody just building whatever they want. Powerful tools, but tools that were generally deployed without an end-to-end strategy in mind.
I agree completely. We see that. I've got one last question for you. Is IT openly embracing this wide approach with people doing things on their own and giving up that iron grip?
Sometimes. So we've actually gone deep into the personas, and there's three sort of personas that happen in IT, and I write specifically for application developers. So, the first persona is the grumpy developer that says, I like to write code. And so, they tend to be a little disdainful of low-code tools. There are less of them. The second class of developers are the ones that are saying, you know what, I'm overwhelmed. I understand that every business is becoming a software business, and I can't build as fast as I need to. So for certain types of applications, we're going to embrace a different way of approaching these. And low-code is great because I can serve the business really, really quickly. More quickly than I could before. By the way, the role of the old coder doesn't go away. We still need those artisans. We still need those brilliant coders. The most mature organizations are the ones that are saying, in order to get to this end state, we have to embrace the concept of business developers, or at least tight partners in development that sit side by side with us and help us develop things either on their own or side by side with us in the course of hours and days, opposed to months and years. So it crosses the board, Tim. There's no common strategy, but I do believe at the end of the day, what we will see is a fundamental shift. In the same way that we had a fundamental shift from ledgers to spreadsheets and everybody became an expert, we're going to ultimately see a shift that says it will become part of a business person's day to build and maintain applications, simple applications that serve their own needs.
Boy, we have exhausted an hour very quickly.
I have received a question for you.
Okay.
The question is that can we change or alter a process once we have deployed it on Newgen platform? At the same time, once we have deployed it on the Newgen platform without having to stop it. And at the same time, if you want to plug in additional processes into an existing one, do we really have to stop the running process, or can we do it without stopping the existing process?
Changes can be implemented on the fly. Usually you would have a development system, and on that development system you could make all the changes and then roll that over. The goal when you have a good BPM system is you don't want to have to bring the whole entire system down and then regen it every time you make a change to it. So we definitely do have that ability to do. And no matter what system you implement, you will, over the course of the first several months, you're going to discover new things that you can do, or you're going to discover that maybe you scoped something wrong and you're going to need to see changes in there. So this is a fundamental part of every implementation. Thank you.
Those are the all questions I had, Tim.
Perfect. I was just going to say, Rob, we need to do this again sometime. This is a very interesting conversation here, particularly at the very end. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you as well. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Thanks, everyone.